All right, it is 7:06 and Wingin' It Wednesday. All three of our panelists feel like we're back together. Oh, I guess I wasn't here last week or something. I don't know. I miss all of you, though. Happy you're here. Stafford, Warren, and Carol all here. And the earrings aren't quite off yet, so I don't know if Carol's fully invested yet. But she will be momentarily. She doesn't have a mic. You're right.
Uh-oh.
That's
There we go.
That's not a slight. It's also not a Democratic conspiracy, I promise you.
In fairness, I'm waiting for my piercings to heal. So
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Well, that's new.
Okay. We're going to talk about Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. He is going to be leaving the Justice Department. We'll talk about that here shortly. But Stafford, I want to start with you. The question this morning after last night's address was, does this move the conversation one way or another? Anything you were surprised to hear in President's speech? The change from concrete now officially to steel, that change?
Yeah.
What are you hearing? Does it move the conversation?
No, it didn't move the conversation at all. Look, I don't. Even Trump. Look, maybe he meant this, or maybe he didn't. But the news this morning was that he didn't want to do the address. That he was asked to do it by Conway and by Sanders, and that he wasn't happy that he had to do it. It looked like he wasn't happy to be there. But that being said, like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I felt that he, of course, spoke a lot of mistruths, said things that were definitely not fact, and it's starting to happen quite a bit now. I mean, Sanders went on TV and got her butt handed to her on Fox News by propagating these lies that 4,000 people were trying to come into the 4,000 suspected terrorists, right? And when they say that kind of stuff, what they're saying is they're talking about people who were on the banned countries list trying to come in, and those are the people they're referring to as suspected terrorists. So they haven't had anybody come through that was actively trying to attack the United States as far as
I think
know.
the distinction is terror suspect. It's
Terrorist.
not a terror suspect.
Yeah, it's not a terrorist suspect at all. I felt that when he claimed that the Democrats wanted a steel barrier, I haven't heard them say that once. Again, all this is coming on the heels of living in this fantasy world where he had all three forms of government. I'm sorry, all three things he needed to get this done. He had the House, he had the Senate, and failed to get it done then because it wasn't popular with his people then, and it's still not popular with people now. We've got Republicans defecting currently. We've got three who are saying, let's get the government open and have a discussion about it. Lisa Murkowski's fallen away. And again, he's completely given up on his campaign promise for Mexico to pay for it.
Carol, so, on that point, are the moderates on both sides, whether it's the moderate Democrats or the moderate Republicans, a lot of them in the heartland, we have two Republican governors along the border who have not signed on to this, who have not said they support this. Where does it stand? Are both ends still just going to be at odds after last night?
Well, about the speech, I thought it was actually really very good. He really stayed to the script and didn't go off script. Didn't veer from that, which I thought was very good, and I thought may have convinced some people who are on the fence, so to speak, about a border wall. We don't know half of who's trying to get into this country. Reading a great article on the Federalist, and well-researched. The guy had gone down to Panama and Costa Rica, and they call those the choke points, and they are interdicting a lot of terrorists who are attempting to get into the country there. However, as usual, they're trying to play it, Panamanians are trying to play it both ways. There's a government position, and then there's what's really happening on the ground. So we don't really know all of the extent of the people, the bad actors trying to get into the country. All I know is this, and I thought the most telling line in the speech, and really probably the one that probably resonated with a lot of people who don't know how phony these Democrats are. I mean, if you talk about people being intransigent, you look at what happened in 2006 and 2012, where people were talking about we need to get a control of the borders, and they were willing to go with a lot more money than you have Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, all of them on record saying we have to get a handle on this, and they were willing to spend a heck of a lot more money. And then what happened? So Trump wanted more money too, but he came down to 5.6 billion. So who's being intransigent? But the most telling line in the speech was, these all of these politicians have walls around their estates. Those are not necessarily to keep bad people out or because you hate the people on the outside. It's because you love the people on the inside and you
Warren-
want to protect them.
Warren, I want to ask about that because it is that has been used before. We've talked about walls. We've talked about everything else. With what we have already there, which is it the you probably know the name better. Is it bollard fencing? Is that what that term is, which is already the steel slats that are there? Much of it needs to be repaired.
How much of that stuff is there? I don't know, but I do know this is that we do have a problem with illegal immigration pouring across that border. I have always said that I'm in favor of guest worker programs and visas and all that stuff.
Yep.
And anybody going to sit here and say that there's not criminals coming across and we're not, it doesn't cost our society anything for them to be here, they are delusional and are probably smoking something they shouldn't be smoking. And, the facts are, and what that every president for the last 4 or 5 have made speeches after speeches about controlling the border and getting a handle on illegal immigration and on and on and on. And you look at Chuck Schumer, you look at Nancy Pelosi, you look at what all they've said, And now all at once, it's 180 degrees opposite. And that the only reason is because Donald Trump is in the White House, and that's the only reason that they're opposed to everything. The worst thing I think that Trump can do right now is to give in. Because, Schumer says American people don't want it. And I think that Schumer is wrong. And I just believe that, that the American people do want security there. Now, they're talking about the high-tech sensors and all of that. What you need is some kind of a physical barrier. At least it's going to stem the tides in these areas that will force them in other places. But all those high-tech sensors and such stuff, they only work to a certain point. Look what happened in Vietnam with the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We had everything you can think of, geophones in the ground from one end of that thing to the other. We had planes flying over all the time taking pictures. We even were bombing the people when we saw them. And did it slow down anything? Well, if it did, I don't know where, because they still were able to just get everything they wanted down there.
So Stafford, but how does that translate into now? Okay, so if we don't do this, because there's a contention that one illegal alien is too many, even if we get it to that amount.
Yeah.
So what is the magic bullet per se?
There is no magic bullet. Look, here's the thing. First off, illegal immigration coming across our southern border has gone down. Its highest point was in 2000. It's lower now than it's been in a long time. It's been on a track that is consistently going lower at all most of the time, right? The numbers Trump gave out last night about women trying to come or children trying to come across the border as illegal immigrants was absolutely false. When it came to people asking for asylum, which is 100% legal, it is legal to cross the border and ask for asylum. Those were the children coming across the border. And when we
It's
talk
legal
about
at the
when
entry
we talk
points.
about phony and how unrealistic this kind of stuff is, listen, I feel sorry for the victims that Trump talked about last night because they went through some horrific things. And murder is a problem that we have in this country. 40,000 people last year died from gun deaths. Okay, that is massive compared to the amount of people who are killed by illegal immigrants, and nobody's doing anything about that. This crisis at the southern border was created by the Trump administration and their policies. Period. We've got 2 dead kids now. We've got kids dying from common flus, right? Sleeping on concrete floors inside of
That
jails.
is absolutely not true. It was not created by the Trump
what's
administration.
happened is people have come and asked for help and wanted to fix this stuff. And the most telling sign about how the rest of the country and the rest of the South along that border feels about Trump, how many Republican governors were standing behind him in that office yesterday saying there was a crisis? The answer is 0, because they don't buy into his BS.
Carol, I'll let you respond.
Well, first of all, they can apply legally at checkpoints, at the entry points, the legal entry points. Number two, these caravans were ginned up by People Without Borders, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, and they have been funded. How did those people get here? How did they eat on the way? How did they get all taken care of? That was funded, and it was specifically to make the Trump administration have to fight back with stronger measures. Some of those original pictures of kids in cages, those were during the Obama administration. That is documented. This has been going on forever. Trump is the only one who has decided that, yeah, it's time to enforce our southern borders and enforce our national sovereignty. So he gets all the blame. But he's a big guy, and he's going to stick with it. And by the way, if he gives in to what Chucky and Nancy said last night about, let's come together, let's reason, let's open the government, and then we can, and then we can talk about. No, that's another rope-a-dope that the Democrats are very good at doing. Give us this, and then we'll give you that. They did it to Reagan when he gave amnesty to 3 million people. They never got any real immigration reform then. They did it to H.W. Bush when he said, read my lips, no more taxes. Okay, we'll give you the spending cuts. He never got the spending cuts. It's another Democrat rope-a-dope, and I don't think Trump is going to fall for it. I hope he doesn't.
All right.
Reagan would be vilified by our current Republicans. If Reagan were
don't
here
kid
today
yourself.
and the things that he's doing, he would be absolutely vilified by the Republicans.
Don't
Lauren,
kid
wrap,
yourself.
Lauren, wrap this
And by the
one
way,
up.
those
Well,
40,000
I'm
gun
gonna-
deaths, may I say one thing
We're
about
going to
that?
talk about
How
gun
many of
deaths.
those were
We're going to talk about guns
suicides?
coming up. We're going to talk about gun deaths coming up.
I absolutely agree with Stafford what he just said, that Reagan would be vilified by the current Republicans because they were vilifying him back then. That the current Republicans that Stafford's talking about, that's the establishment group.
That's
They
correct.
are opposed to anything other than bigger government, more spending. They're
It's
mostly.
always a conspiracy with Trump being the victim.
Well,
That's-
there's
that's
some
that's
things
the
that,
answer to
yeah, I
everything.
agree with you. But
Poor
there's,
Trump.
but there's
There's no
sometimes,
conspiracy. Just read the news.
but
Yeah.
there's sometimes that what you call conspiracy theories is conspiracy facts.
All right, it is 7:21, and we go to the phone lines at 232-1542. Scott, you're up first. Go ahead, your thoughts on last night. Jump in on the conversation as the fourth panelist on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead, sir.
I thought the speech was great. Like Harold said, he stayed on topic. He stayed on point. He didn't go on one of his tangents. And there's only one reason that they're doing this and having a shutdown, in my opinion, is the Democrats and everybody else that's against this idea is simply because it's Donald Trump. Anybody else, they would fund it and move on. But because it's him, they want to try to make a point because, he's a great businessman. He gets what he wants all the time, and he does a great job at it. But because it's Donald Trump, they just want to shut him down so they can try to prove a point. And all they're doing is making themselves look bad because nobody's going to get reelected when you do what you're doing like this. And it's really, really disheartening and appalling that you can go on TV and disrespect the president of the United States the way they're doing it. I mean, the day and age that we're in now, this is ridiculous.
So,
This
Scott,
man is your president, whether you like it or not.
I want to just ask you, so one of the things that kept coming up, and Stafford alluded to it, do some of the fuzzy facts change your opinion? The 4,000 suspected terrorist persons of special interest, not at the southern border. It happened at
doesn't change my
airports.
opinion one bit. The thing is, they're coming across, they're getting across, they're taking our jobs, they're getting all these jobs because they're, in some people's minds, cheap labor. The industry I'm in, I'm in sales and of automobiles, and we have people that come in all the time buying, farm trucks for their farms, and it's like, well, I'm going to get my Mexicans to work, they're cheap. It's ridiculous. There's hardworking people in this country that are here legally and are citizens that can't find work because all of the labor jobs are being given to these illegals that are cheap labor, so to speak. And it's ridiculous. You're coming across, you're criminals, you're killing people, you're getting away with it. You sneak back across, they send you back, you sneak back across, something has to be done to stop it. So
majority of those
this
farm workers are.
fuzzy information, I mean, come on.
All right, yeah,
It is what it
Stafford.
is.
Yeah, Stafford. What were you saying?
Yeah, majority of those farm workers are legal. They're like Randall's does it right. Randall's has a service where they pick crab and package crawfish. Those are all legal.
Basically,
work
they're
release,
on work visas.
work visas, correct. And the majority of the farm workers are the same way.
All right, Scott. Hey, thanks for your
And
insight.
they're not killing people
Thanks.
It's like such bad.
Well, we do know some
bad things have happened. Yes.
Yeah, we do
I'm
know.
not rooting for
but the numbers show that that illegal immigrants commit crime at a lesser rate than citizens of the United States.
I don't believe those numbers.
You cannot believe it all you want. It's documented data.
So how do you even get to that number though? Because you're talking about such a smaller group of people.
Well, it's reported through our sheriff system up through the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Every crime that's committed is reported into the federal database, and that's where they get these numbers from.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay.
New Orleans reporting in the federal database?
Yes.
I know there for a while they were exempt from it because the crime was so damn high.
Interesting
Okay.
aspect. Yesterday, there was some movement in Congress regarding what is being, no pun intended, universally called universal background checks. There was a moment where, excuse me, Gabby Giffords, who was shot, it was the 8th anniversary yesterday of her being shot. She was shot in the head during an event, kind of Meet the Constituents event that happened over in Arizona. Then you had in the last couple of years our own congressman, or at least from Louisiana, Steve Scalise. Both of them were together, saw each other. It seems like they both have the support. Carol, do these faces, these very public faces, both who have serious injuries still? You know, he will probably walk with one crutch his entire life. She is still battling a lot. I think publicly she can look right and talk to people, but we know that there is a traumatic brain injury there. Don't
we already have background checks?
Well, see, but that's the deal. It's not. There are a lot of loopholes.
Yeah, and they keep expanding these things, and it still never works. And why is that? Because criminals don't follow the law. Because there's so much gun trading going on off the books, and they're getting the gun, or they get it like these kids. I would like to more focus on the failure of law enforcement. For instance, in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas case, that sheriff. That kid had multiple reports of problems, and this has happened over and over again. So it's the people who are not law abiding are going to follow whatever law they pass. Mm-hmm. You know that the criminals will not follow any of those laws. So every time they try to expand these laws and think this is going to be the solution, it never is.
Because that guy, if I remember correctly, should not have even been eligible. So somewhere the ball was dropped in, but
he shouldn't have even been in that school because of the Obama Promise program. They kept letting him back in. They don't want to expel any kids, and that was one of the deputies that is definitely against that Sheriff Israel. He was a real cause of the problem there too. But the other point that has been brought up, and not enough, is the number of times you see these people on some kind of psychotropic drugs that alter their behavior and their personality. I'd like to see us focus more on that aspect of it, of interdicting these kids especially before this happens.
What is, if there is a Carol Ross approved Gold Seal plan to deal with the problem, where do you start?
Carol Ross is not an expert in law enforcement. I would trust the law enforcement people.
Okay, that makes sense.
These people are all running around as though they're experts in all this stuff, and they're not.
All right, Warren, your thoughts? Oh wow, I'm not going to call you an expert because Carol just said you're not one. So what do you think about this? How do we take a bite out of this?
Well, it's time to acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of people bloviating out there who have no idea what the real problem is.
I will agree with you on that one. I will agree with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I believe, and I'm not going to quote statistics and data and all that. Carol says I'm no expert.
Thank you, Warren,
you
for acknowledging that.
Expert.
I believe
iPhone
that,
expert.
I believe that the most deaths from gunshots in the United States come from suicide.
Suicide, absolutely.
And so, how do you stop that? Let's pass a law that says it's illegal for you to kill yourself. And I believe that we have that law on the books. It's been on there probably for over 150 years. I don't know, but
each state, I believe.
Because I think that is the one thing. I think Louisiana is one of those states where it's like, what is the one crime? If you're successful, you can't go to jail. And if you're unsuccessful, you can be charged. And it's attempted suicide. Like, you never see it.
Unless you're in a state that has assisted suicide.
Unless you have that, I
Maybe.
guess.
which I'm not opposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just throw that out.
Okay.
I love when you crack yourself up.
And this
Warren
so rarely
himself
happens.
up.
Well,
Well, sometimes I feel like you want to do it on this show. Like, you know what, guys, this is enough. You know what? I'm not having this conversation anymore.
you mean to do a suicide or cause a suicide?
I
Warren,
love
for
when
you-
he laughs at his own
Whoa.
jokes.
Listen, for you, I support assisted suicide as well. It can't be easy looking at yourself in the morning every day. And
Well, it's not.
That is what I love.
And you will,
about
and you,
And then
and
he has
you
to
will
come in
learn
here and
that.
look at
The
you,
older
Stafford.
you get, you will learn
oh,
that.
I've hated myself for years, Warren. You don't have
Oh,
to worry
no,
about that.
no.
So
Now you need psychiatric help.
No, I got guns.
Wingin' It Wednesday. So would you like to add your 2 cents here on this one, Stafford?
I would absolutely love to.
Yes.
First off, Carol puts out, as usual, some really bad logic with that. Of course, criminals don't
Why
follow
don't you talk
laws.
about your stuff?
That's because
stick with
because,
your stuff.
because I think it's important to this community that people hear as actual facts.
Yes, exactly.
So if you're saying that we should not increase laws or do more laws because criminals don't obey laws, then why have laws to begin with? That's a bad philosophical point of view. It's a fallacy. It's not a good argument. So it's not something that should be perpetuated. Second of all, suicide rates go down in communities that restrict access to guns.
We didn't know.
That's something that we've seen happen in the UK and in Australia. And what they're talking about now is peer-to-peer background checks. I don't know if Steve Scalise came out and supported it. I'm kind of on the fence about it. The reason that the NRA and others have opposed it is because it's going to give you a database of who has what guns. That database exists right now when it comes to cars. We know who has what cars and many other things, pieces of property. So I'm in a weird position with it. I kind of support it. I think it would prevent straw sales, which is a big problem where somebody who can legally buy a gun goes and buys a gun.
It would prevent them if people follow it, though, right?
Yeah,
If people
follow
follow
the law,
Well, that's-
you're not
and-
going to
and
prevent
that's-
it all.
And that's the joke amongst gun owners, especially bump stock, owners, because now those are supposedly illegal, even though there's a lot of people arguing that anything that Matthew Whitaker does will probably be eventually thrown out because he's not an actual attorney general. Is that they're all disappeared in boating accidents, right? That, oh my goodness, I went fishing and dropped my 9 bump stocks, right? So it's going to be hard to enforce, but we've done it before. You used to be able to buy a Tommy gun out of the back of a Sears magazine, which is a fully automatic rifle, and that's changed.
All right, let's take a couple calls to end this segment. Carol, you give your 2 cents and we'll line up some calls.
Okay, really quick. I mean, first of all, Stafford, as usual, misrepresents what I said. I didn't say we didn't need any laws. I just said every time we expand these laws and expect them to solve all the problems, they don't. That's number one. Number two, the Trump Justice Department gave you what you libs have all been screaming for. Do away with the bump stocks. They did it, and you're still not happy.
But-
you see, he can't do anything right.
By the way, first off, not a Democrat. Second of all,
I
don't really
didn't say
necessarily
you were a Democrat.
don't-
Again, you
don't-
misrepresented. I
don't-
said you're a liberal.
Don't support the bump stock ban because it's not logical to me. And the thing that
Because it
really
doesn't
gets me,
work?
the thing that really gets me is that for 8 years we heard idiots come out and say that Obama was going to come take your guns, and what we've seen now is we've seen one guy, I believe in Maryland, that was murdered recently because he was I think he was 5150'd. Which is you become a ward of the state for a certain amount of days when they think that you're in danger. They can take his guns, and the guy ended up dead in the process. And this has happened under Trump, and your gun rights are being restricted under a Republican, not under a Democrat.
Let's go to the phones at 232-1542. Good morning. You are now the 4th panelist on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead with your thoughts.
I think the term Stafford is looking for in Australia is after the restriction of guns, suicides continue to go down. They were already on a downward trend. And I don't think the restriction on firearms in Japan has decreased suicides. And Stafford could fact check me on that, but I don't think that they have gone down.
I think you're right about that. I think Japanese has a very special situation when it comes to suicides.
Well, they have a really high rate of suicide
Right.
because of
Seppuku.
responsibility
Seppuku.
and culture and everything else.
It is
Thank
a
you
cultural
Thank
thing.
you.
so much for your call. All right, quick break here. We're
They
back
do
with
it
more
with
from our panelists.
Swords.
Do you want to go to the phone right now? We can.
They're gonna
Vern?
outlaw swords.
Yeah.
All right,
I was going to
let's
say, let's get this one and then we'll move on.
perfect. Let's
Okay.
get this one, then we'll move on. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you.
Yeah, I think y'all need to give Stafford a spot on the radio show. If Carol Ross got a spot and Moon Griffon got a spot, this man needs a spot. He's a voice that needs to be heard more often.
All right, thanks
I
for your insight.
sincerely appreciate that.
There you go.
See,
That's the
Steph,
nicest thing anybody has ever called in and said about me.
Hey,
I wouldn't
it's
expect.
a new year.
I wouldn't expect a trend. I'll put
I
it
would
to you
love
that
to
way.
have coffee with
All
you,
right.
sir.
It's 7:34 now at Newstalk 96.5 KPEL. Coming up, Stephen Wagasback from LABI.
Wingin' Wednesday is brought to you each and every week by LABI, Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. And Stephen Wagasback joins us to talk about an annual event. It is the political and networking event of the entire year. Good morning, Stephen.
Yeah, we're 1 month away from the 2019 Lobby Annual Meeting, and it's going to be the must-attend event of the year if you're a business in the Acadiana region or, quite frankly, anywhere across the state. We'll have all the right policymakers and state officials that you need to meet if you're a business, and many of your colleagues around the state you can share ideas with. But there's a lot more than that. This year, we're going to try to find a way to help our members engage more effectively, not just with elected officials, but with their customers.
So tell us about the lineup. Who is speaking this year?
We have two speakers. One, Kristen Soltis Anderson. She's the author of The Selfie Vote, Where Millennials Are Taking America. She's going to talk in depth about where are millennial voters, what makes them tick, what motivates them at the ballot box, and how you as a business can better connect with millennial customers. Then we're going to have Scott Stratton come in and talk about how to market to these types of customers so you can get your product to them and better connect with those customers of tomorrow. So it'll be a great day of education, networking, policy, and a whole lot more. So we hope folks can go to our website at www.labi.org. Join us in Baton Rouge on February 11th and 12th for a great two-day event. I promise you'll walk away with a lot of new information, new contacts, and new outlook on how to better connect with your customers.
Sounds like a great event and a wealth of information. Stephen Wagasback, CEO of LABI, Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. He joins us every week here on the show. There's more coming up just ahead on Newstalk 96.5 KPEL.
All right, it is 7:38, and some news last night out of Lafayette Consolidated Government is now that LUS Fiber is out from under the close watch and lifeguard of LUS as a whole. We hear that it shouldn't make a difference for customers, but Warren, as soon as I read that, before I even had 2 feet on the ground this morning out the bed, it ran chills up my spine because all I thought was the whole next gen thing. It just made it seem like, well, now we just made it very easily. You can't say, well, fiber's going to be part of it now. So should we read any more into this in this ordinance that was passed last night making LUS Fiber its own deal, or is it just a long time coming?
Well, Stafford's going to give us a rundown shortly on the conspiracy of it.
I don't know that there's any YouTube videos about this, though.
Who is behind it? There probably is. There's what?
Alex
couple
Jones.
100 million, couple 100
please.
million videos on YouTube. This is something that probably should have been done a long time ago. In business, if a business can't stand on its own, it doesn't need to exist. I mean, that's kind of like rule number one. And fiber has not lived up to its billing as about being a profitable center, in that, you saw that 2 or 3 times in audits, and then you said, well, they're taking depreciation into account. Well, you can't do that. The hell you can't. Depreciation is a real issue. And so, I think fiber is doing pretty good. But, it does need to be separated, and it does need to stand on its own. And they need to have their own little group in there that figures out what they need to serve their customers the best.
I'm telling you, I have the fastest internet on my block, but you know what I still have? A pile of dirt in my front yard where they hit the water line getting it. So I have fast internet, but I have a water feature.
Who did?
When the crews came through, they've dealt with it, but
Well, I mean, but it wasn't
You-
those.
But my internet is fast, so I'm not
Own a
complaining.
shovel.
No.
It wasn't those
I'm not.
contracted crews out of Nashville that did that.
I don't know. Stafford, it
Damn
seems like
Tennesseans.
it seems like every time we would get an announcement, especially in the last year, about where LUS Fiber was expanding, the other parts of the growing metropolis we have would be mad it wasn't coming there. Why is it not going to Karen Crow? Why is it not there? And we would hear good explanations of it, or we would hear explanations that seemed to make sense, but it almost seems impossible that we're not in a better situation because everyone who has it wants it, and more people want it after that. Is it a cost thing? Is
no,
it? What do you think?
no. It's so. I actually talked to Terry about this years ago, so I have the answer that you're looking for.
Give it to me.
So I'll give you a quick contextual situation. The reason that LUS exists is because all the major power supply companies passed up Lafayette and chose to put power in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Opelousas. At the time, Opelousas was twice the size of Lafayette. It had 60,000 residents. Lafayette had 30,000 residents.
Talking about utilities, not fiber.
Well, yeah, not yeah. She's talking. He's talking about electric.
Yeah.
Of that.
All right.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's why we own our own utility system, because we were never a large enough market at the time to get it. Same thing happened with water, sewage, and then now telecom. So we kept getting passed up. AT&T, all the majors said they're not going to come here. So we passed the bill to get it done. We put a socialized system in place, and we put fiber to the home inside the city limits of Lafayette. What's happened is as soon as we built our own system, Cox, who refused to invest in fiber for residents, I'm fairly certain they were providing high-speed internet to businesses, complained. AT&T came in. In fact, AT&T is the fiber in my neighborhood, and they tried to gobble up the pieces of the market that they could get that LUS wasn't in. And so the one thing LUS is not going to do is tell you where they're putting fiber next. That's just not part of their business plan. What they do is they go in, they look at a place, and they say, is this place underserved? Can we reach it with our current system? If they can do that, then they go in and they say, we're going to put fiber here. And they usually have a fill rate of 70 to 90% in those neighborhoods. What happens is, as soon as they make that announcement, AT&T pays people to go door to door to say, hey, we're coming with fiber. But LUS typically gets there faster. So the reason that they do that is because of that. The decision to separate the two, again, I get confused by what Joel does. I don't think this is part of the system to sell it off. We're getting close to an election year. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's either this year or next year for Joel. And I think that the LUS thing is what's going to sink his campaign.
Okay. All right, Carol. Your thoughts on the conscious uncoupling?
Yeah, I was about to fall asleep.
Oh, come on, Carol.
I mean, come on. Who does? Most people know the history of the utility system. We're talking about what's going on right now with fiber. In October, I believe they passed a resolution. Well, they passed an ordinance or whatever that they were going to spin off fiber. That there were going to be two different directors. It was part of the budget amendment. That's what it was. Part of the budget amendment. I think what they did last night was to come back and make sure it was legal. What they did in October, and I do believe the attorneys maybe weighed in on that. In terms of spinning off, it will be easier to spin off fiber if it's a standalone department, that's for sure. And in terms of what they owe right now, I mean, the latest numbers are, it's pretty startling. The total current liabilities right now, with the pensions and everything, because remember, they started out with a $125 million bond issue. They still owe about $110 million on that, $110 million roughly. But they still owe the utilities department about $27 million. The total liabilities, I believe, the latest numbers I got from two different sources, about $146 million. So, how are you going to come out from under that? I do not know, because it doesn't look like they still. Utility system has to be paid back. The question that I've always had in my mind is, this thing was done by a vote of the people, actual vote of the people. The ballot proposition setting it up actually said that it would be backed up by the Lafayette utility system. That is not going to happen anymore. It will not be backed up by the Lafayette, although they say it's still owned by the city of Lafayette, and it's still going to be managed now by the new council. But who's going to back up the fiber, and how are they going to be able to grow when they're finally are getting competition? And what about the new technologies that are coming in that are going to be? Will they ever be able to get out from under this debt? That's the question I have. I love my fiber. I supported it from day one. I still support it. However, I still have a question. I want to know, yes, they're doing positive cash flow. No question about that. But it's not enough to pay off the debt. It's enough to continue running the fiber division, but not enough to pay off any of the debt.
All right, comments from the beanbag. Warren Cottle sitting over there on the corner.
Yeah,
lava lamp.
What I would like to say is that we keep hearing this thing, but nobody wanted to bring fiber in here until LUS did. That is absolutely not so. I disagree. The phone company bought fiber in here, I think back in the 1980s was the first
Not
time.
to the home, though.
Not to the home.
No, I know, but they also had a lot of resistance too, just going to some of these commercial buildings and all of that. But they did. It was fiber here, and that it was a big step for LUS to take, and they took it. But on the other hand, I think that they were also a bit disingenuous with their arguments on why they needed to be there.
All right.
So to touch on what Carol said, bonds are required by state law to be paid at the rate at which they're issued, and you have to follow the rules of that. If LUS has positive cash flow, that means that they're meeting their debt obligations. So when you hear this kind of stuff, just think about where it's coming from.
LUS has positive cash flow. LUS was backing up the fiber. That's how it was set up. That's my point.
Just keep in mind alternative reality versus reality, okay?
232.
I got the numbers. That is the reality. The numbers are the reality, not your emotional response. The numbers are the reality. That's what we're facing today.
Let's go to the phones. Line 1, good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead with your thoughts, LUS and LUS Fiber.
Good morning, gang.
Hello.
As somebody who's been in this business for 40 years and worked for several major carriers, the statement I got was, if we'd have known the headache to get into Lafayette Parish that it took for us to get here, we would have gone around. Because do you remember the central office next to the courthouse, downtown Lafayette, that never got allowed to expand out from there?
Are you talking about other carriers?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
That paid a lot
Bell
of money
South.
to get into Lafayette. That was McLeod USA. That was several other companies that got their services into Lafayette, but then their right-of-way fees were through the roof for them to be able to get out of their office. So anyway, there's several companies that made the statement, if we'd have known the headache we had to go through to get into Lafayette, we would have went around Lafayette Parish.
All right. Thanks for your insight.
Good
Appreciate
job.
it. Thanks for listening. All right.
Look, there's no doubt in terms of the monetary thing. This was an investment to really make Lafayette more attractive to tech firms, et cetera. And I think it has worked, and that has worked. And from a marketing standpoint, and that's the total reason that I supported fiber to the home, because it gave us that unique selling point that to market Lafayette over and above the image of the state of Louisiana. So I was willing to make that investment. I still am, but I want to see some movement on this debt service.
All right.
Sometimes socialist programs work well for the good of society.
7:49 now.
I wouldn't call that a socialist program. You pay through the nose. If the government were giving it away, that would be. This is a government-sponsored enterprise. It's not a socialist enterprise.
We're back to wrap up Wingin' It Wednesday next on News Talk 96.5.
Ross reports.
I just turned on the radio after a Walmart run.
In order not to repeat history, you must know history.
You made my day.
Go ahead, make my day.
Bringing you years of expertise later today at 2, only on News Talk 96.5. KPEL.
I'm digging up bones, I'm digging up bones. Exhuming things that's better left alone. But I'm resurrecting memories of a love that's dead and gone. Yeah, tonight I'm sitting alone.
All right, it is 7:51. We have reached our last segment of Wingin' It Wednesday. By the way, you can listen to Miss.
Possible.
You can listen to Miss Ross this afternoon on the Ross
Yes,
Report.
you can.
2 to 4.
With all my misinformation.
Well, you know what? If you're looking to take a nap, Stafford, and you think she's boring, then you curl up. We would love the extra listener.
I got the same bad news I always have. I don't listen to the radio.
Well.
Okay.
Fire that man. Fire that man.
Yeah.
You're in the minority.
Don't
I'll put
pay
you,
him
I'll put you that
anymore.
way.
Okay.
Some don't hear him bad-mouth the
Yeah, they're going to cut my check.
No, he's not bad. He's not bad mouthing it, but he's
Well, he
obviously
is.
missing out on a lot. Now all of his misunderstanding is
Now it's
explained.
explained,
It
'cause
is
you don't
totally
listen to
explained.
radio.
That's why I'm wrong about
Do
everything.
you realize that the most trusted medium still is radio?
Not TV.
I don't.
Trusted
Yeah,
by
I don't
whom?
watch a lot of TV either.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's fine. That's great. I'm just telling you, my personal
I just want to throw that out
perspective
there.
is that I don't listen. If I can not consume commercials, I find a way to not consume commercials. So I've cut the
That's
cord
a
at the
shame.
house.
You miss out on a lot of great information.
And I listen to podcasts. And
Yeah,
if
I
there's some,
understand.
and then I can go back with a nice podcast. I can pause it. I
Yeah.
can go and look like, is this true?
You're the 7%er.
I can look up and go, hey, this
93% listen through the breaks.
I will say this.
I just wanted to throw. I'm just trying to convert you on this.
I
on
want
this
your
one
hot
issue.
take, all of you guys, on the news that we have this morning. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein going to leave the Justice Department shortly after William Barr, the president's nominee for AG, is confirmed. That's according to a source familiar with his thinking.
Ooh.
I would love someone to be quoted and say they're familiar with my thinking, because if you had any idea what was going on in this head day to day, you'd say, I don't know how that
You just run the other way.
stays on the
screaming,
air
huh?
and your kids stay alive. I don't know.
You put a governor on that mouth.
Yeah, exactly. So Stafford, thoughts about this? I think it's been widely expected. Rod Rosenstein, I think, has felt slighted the whole time.
I think he's done a really good job of protecting the Mueller investigation. With what came out yesterday about where we finally have the connection of collusion between the campaign and the Russians, with Manafort sharing internal campaign data with the Russians, and that coming into public record, I think the Mueller investigation cannot be stopped, and Rosenstein feels that he can walk away from his position without any danger to the special counsel.
I think, Carol, you'd probably agree. If this address wouldn't have happened last night, all the headlines would be about this unredacted information, the Paul Manafort trial, who he met, where it happened. This is what everyone would be talking about today.
Paul Manafort was a bad actor from day one. I didn't like him from day one. And I don't know whether he was at the time, what was going on at the time. It may or may not bear fruit. Every time we see something like this, it's like, oh, this is the smoking gun. And then it turns out to be nothing. I mean, that's happened over and over again. But getting to Rod Rosenstein, as it turns out, the more information that comes out, Rod Rosenstein was in on the fix that for the campaign from day one. They were surveilling the campaign under this flimsiest of pretenses, which was the dossier. And it turns out he knew all along about the dossier.
But it was Carter Page too, right? Carter Page,
Papadopoulos, all these tangential people. None of them. I mean, none of them really.
19 people convicted.
Not Flynn. That was a different thing, and they got him for different things, actually. That his connection with Turkey and how he lied about that connection with Turkey. That was the bad thing about that. It wasn't necessarily the Russians. So it's still going to play out. We still don't know. The early reports on these things usually peter out eventually. But on Rod Rosenstein, I mean, they have documented some of the statements that he has made. It's long overdue for him to be gone because he was part of the fix.
All right. Sorry, guys. That sounded like a gunshot, but it was just me. It was just me.
In a bag.
Sorry. They got me. Sorry. Oh, it's the big one.
It's a
Warren.
But now that the bump stocks are outlawed, we're okay.
It wasn't a bump stock for sure. It was just one shot. Warren, your thoughts. Wrap this one up for us.
Well, first of all, Rod Rosenstein needs to be investigated and probably needs to be indicted and sent to prison.
Mm-hmm.
With all of this stuff that we're listening to about, well, this is coming out, well, that's coming out, well, what did this person do? And this is a big national emergency about who met with whom, when, where, and all of this, that, and other. We had this big deal about the guy Khashoggi being killed in Turkey in the consulate in Saudi Arabia, and we're going to get to the bottom of that. We're going to find out who did this, and we need to know. We need answers. Who the hell killed Seth Rich?
You got
Why isn't that being investigated? Why is it? Why does all of that stuff just stop? You have so many.
I think part of the reason is Seth Rich's family. But
yeah, Seth Rich's family has come out and sued people and said that
they have nothing to do with
Oh, they just birthed them and raised them.
Huh?
They just birthed them and raised them. They have sued people to make them stop spouting this conspiracy theory, Warren.
No,
it's a complete fabricated conspiracy theory. It's more Alex Jones YouTube BS that we hear from.
Listen, look, I never listened to Alex Jones YouTube BS. But here's what I'm saying. That was a criminal investigation. Why did it stop?
Because they found that he was killed by a thief and
Who?
not
Who killed him?
Seth Rich was killed. It was a robbery. It was not. It was not a Clinton conspiracy to shut the guy up.
Since when do family members get to stop an investigation?
That's the whole
that's
point,
an interesting
Stafford,
part
is who
too,
killed him.
But did they have a suspect? I don't remember.
Normally, a criminal investigation starts off. This is what happened. We need to have an investigation to find out who did what, when, and where.
It also could still be open, but we're just not hearing about it because
that's
also a regular.
That's not something I would think about. The thing, why isn't Hillary Clinton and her classified information that he put out on her, she put out on her emails from private server? Why isn't that investigated?
Okay, guys.
All right, children, calm down.
I love
I haven't perp walked anybody out of there.
Here's another one. What about the gal Bria Payton, who was the journalist who put out the thing about Mueller and them wiping the phones clean with the struck page emails, text messages.
But what did she die from, though? She wasn't killed.
Well, that's the whole point. Was she killed or was she
Oh,
not?
She
okay.
was she was
died.
suicided.
Okay,
Well, yeah, I
We just
mean,
have
that's
17
a good point. She died from, quote, meningitis and pneumonia at the same time. She was perfectly fine one
So hell
after
of
So
a
the
why
double
aren't we
dose.
investigating
Next day she's dead.
Dianne Feinstein's driver who was spying for China?
Okay, we just have
Oh,
4
there's-
seconds,
We're
guys.
not investigating
I
any
love
of
you
this
all.
stuff.
Warren, Cottle,
Have a great day.
Stafford, and Carol.
Enjoy
Thanks
your
for
week. Happy
coming
New
in.
Year.